It's been raining for a few days. We've had winter for a couple months, and we had some ice storms. There's a lot of stuff down. And right now it's kind of between rain, but everything's good and soaking wet. And so we're going to go out here and find ourselves some dry firewood and build a fire. This was just brought down recently, but it is standing dead, and so it should be well seasoned and nice and dry inside. Let's see what we find. So you can see wood inside there is dry. So we'll just cut off a little piece here. And the other thing we'll do with teamwork while doing this is one person will be cutting, and you start to heat up and get a little tired, and you just get out of the way. Another person steps up. And so the idea is the saw never stops, and yet you're rotating through the work and splitting up the labor, which is another great thing about teamwork. All right, we almost got her here. There, got enough dry wood to get a fire going. What we're going to be doing is basically spark-based Firecraft. We're not going to be using a flame to ignite, but rather a metal match and some naturally occurring pieces of tools and supplies we have out here. There we go.
And you're making a baton, which is used for
hitting things. In this case, we're going to use it to drive the blade of the knife down through our firewood. For a fire, you need three things. You need fuel, you need oxygen, and you need heat. So we're going to make sure we have all three of those things. The other thing about three with Firecraft is there are three different kinds of fuel. There's firewood, kindling, and tinder. So tinder is the stuff that will most easily take a spark or a flame or something and get going quickly, and then tinder will help build that beginning flame up, and once you get it going, then you can start adding your firewood. So let's see if we can't get something going here. What we're going to do, let's see, let's do it this way. We're going to get a little plank out of the middle of this, which I will explain here in a second. It's called a base and a brace. So we now have a base, and this is going to be the surface on which we're going to build our fire. And if you are going to build a fire, you're out in the forest, you want to make sure you dig down to mineral dirt. This stuff up here is soil, decayed matter, but if you go down further, you'll get down to where it's mineral dirt. Because this stuff can actually burn, or it can carry a fire maybe to a root, and you can actually start fires inadvertently. Because we're not going to build this up, I'm just going to build it right on the forest floor. But ordinarily it's really important to get down to mineral dirt. So now we've got our base. Again, that's something on which to build our fire. And then I'm going to do a brace, like so. And so what this does is it gives us a flat, dry surface on which to build. And then as we do our tinder and kindling, we're going to build it up by resting from the base to the brace, and that keeps that oxygen flowing in there. So that gives us two of the things that we're going to need for Firecraft. It's going to give us the fuel, and it's going to give us air circulation. After that, it's up to us to add the heat. Now under wet conditions, it's good to be able to protect the firewood that you do. And that's part of what closed cell foam will do for us. If it were really raining, it would keep that wood dry. And we talked about the three kinds of fuel: firewood, kindling, and tinder. And it's best to collect that in the opposite order, especially in the cold, wet environments, because as we expose this to the environment, it's going to start sucking up moisture out of the air, ambient moisture. And so we want to cut the big stuff first, set that aside, and then start making the smaller stuff like our kindling. So we'll do some of that now. It's also nice to have a bit of a workbench, which I don't actually have here, which is usually a down log or something like that. But so let me go grab one real quick. I shall return. This will give us a workbench on which to do some more processing.
So it's
The dry outer stuff I'll set aside for now.
it's not really raining right now. How wet is the environment?
This isn't too bad. If it was really raining, the heavier rains, you'd probably wind up having to put some sort of shelter over, put a tarp up, a poncho, something to cover it. But today isn't too bad, so we're kind of fortunate in that regard. And we're just working this stuff down, smaller and smaller stuff.
There have been some significant downpours even today.
Yes. Yeah, the environment is definitely a wet environment. There's no question about that.
In fact, it was sprinkling when we came down here. I think it kind of is now.
Yeah, a little bit. We're under a little bit of a canopy, which helps keep some of that water off us. We're getting down there. Sometimes the smaller knife can be easier to use on stuff like this, but it's nice to be able
on a dead tree like you're using here. How much? Well, how old do you think this tree is? Or how long do you think it's been dead?
This tree has probably been dead for a few years. You can tell it's really seasoned. It's very dry inside, which we will use to our advantage.
And it has a bark seal on it. When it's raining, how much? How deep does the moisture get?
I've seen probably one of the most extreme wet events. I used to work with a guy who would do survival classes, and we were out in, I think it must have been February or March, and it was heavy snow, and then it had rained for weeks, and we wound up cutting down a piece that was probably a tree this size, and there was only maybe an inch or two core that was dry. It had soaked up that much water. So these really are terrible conditions for this. Now we're making our kindling, which you want a very small mass to surface area so that it has a chance to heat those fibers quickly, thoroughly, and cause them to combust. And again, within the context of the search and rescue team, you have teamwork for doing the Firecraft too. So someone can be gathering fuels, someone else can be setting up a spot for it. Got it, go. But we train to have all the skills necessary, and then when in the team environment we do need to get a fire going quickly, everyone's able to do that. So we've got some kindling, we got some firewood, and now the tinder. This is going to be some pitchwood, which is just the pitch or sap has saturated the fibers of this wood, and it will catch a spark real easy. So we're just going to carve some of this off.
Where did you get the pitchwood?
This is from an old stump. As a tree dies, just like a human, the circulation stops and the pitch will pool in the lower regions. And so you see the old stumps that have the fingers sticking up out of the rubble. A lot of times we call it stump thumping, where you're going out and looking for pitch. I'm just going to get a couple smaller pieces here. Okay, so now we've got our base, our brace, our tinder, our kindling, and some firewood. So let's see if we can't throw a spark on this and make things happen. Let's see what we can. Now we'll introduce heat to our equation and get all three human-controlled pieces, I should say, of a fire going. Yep. Go. Let that get going a little bit. Come back and hit it with some more. Gradually getting larger as we go. And then pretty soon we get to the point where we can start adding the firewood. One of the nice things about the base and the brace approach as it relates to search and rescue is that frequently you may have a patient that you're working on and you need to get a fire going, but all this clattering and battering around in the vicinity of someone who might be otherwise distressed isn't all that good. And so we can go somewhere away from the patient and get the fire going. And then because it is a base and a brace, we can actually come in and pick it up and carry it to wherever that fire needs to be. And you can see now it's starting to pick up. And that's where you can start adding some of your bigger fuels. And you can build it on up. As big as a fire as you'd like. We do debris piles, burn piles and whatnot. And you can throw gas on it or whatever, but typically, even though we get the huge burn piles going, we'll often just start with something as small and as simple as this. And you can build this up to whatever size kind of fire you need. And you can see that it works pretty well. Even if we're in pouring down rain, this technique is still going to work. And this is just one way. There are all kinds of different ways, but this basically you just cut an 8 to 10 inch piece out of a standing dead, and that gives you everything you need to get this far with the addition of pitchwood. The same thing can be done. You can actually shave this stuff.
Here comes the rain after we built the fire.
Yep. I mean, you can shave this down and get the little fibrous, almost sawdust, and that will catch a spark too. It's just that pitchwood works so much better.
Yeah.
Really kind of our secret weapon in adverse conditions. And when applied correctly, I have never seen this fail. I failed. Other people fail, but the techniques and the principles that we're talking about here are essentially foolproof. It just takes practice, and that's why I always say to vary your sources and practice your methods, and then get it done.